My first car cost £200. Literally, like you can't get around to drinks for that now.
Hold on, you bought a used car for 200.
Yeah, wait,
what
how much
car
was
were
the,
you driving?
What car was it? Yeah.
Fiat Cinquecento, boys, 1997. Fiat Cinquecento.
Wait, is it a two-seater?
No, it had 5 seats. Barely. 900cc engine.
5 seats, but
Mate, if you get five, five like
It had bike pedals,
five
just in case
lads
the
in
engine
that, you
wasn't
are
working.
struggling to get up a hill. Yeah, it was a tiny little thing. But now,
One
like,
of those ones.
even
did you have
like,
a spoiler on it, Jack? Tell us. Did you have a
kept
subwoofer
it
in the
stock,
back?
Kept it classic. Oh, your speakers,
Couple
yeah,
rims.
but it would be no hubcaps, busted off hubcap. Mate, one of the funnest, and man, I missed that car, but like, those are the, like, again, second, third order effects. Like, I think already, like, used car, like the floor of the used car market is so much higher than it like ever was when we were in that age bracket. You know, like you get like a shit box car. I don't think you pay less than 10 grand for like something that's roadworthy. Insane.
Welcome to another episode of Not Investment Advice. You got Jack Butcher, Trunk Fan, Bilal Zaidi. Boys, there's only one place to be today. Tariff season is here. We just got 104% tariff on China, apparently. As we're recording the pod, this is breaking. And we should say to people, this is Tuesday, April the 8th, 2025. And when you listen to this in the future, this is a moment. This is, yeah, seriously, that's what I mean. By the time this is out tomorrow, things might have changed already. Before we get into the full tariff breakdown, we're going to try our best to break it down. People have been asking since last week. Jack mentioned this concept, and I want you to give us a few examples, Jack. You talked about this idea of the nominative determinism. Did I say that correctly, or do I sound like a T9 keyboard right now?
You did, mate, and I'm gonna give credit to a good friend of mine, Schmripto, for the expansion of this. But this came up in the context of a very prominent figure in markets and news, a man named Scott Bessent. Apparently the surname Bessent originates from the Middle English word besant or besand, which refers to a gold coin first minted in Byzantium, potentially used to denote a moneyer. There's a little bit of a
moneyer
segue.
Is that the technical term?
A moneyed individual? No, because a moneyed individual.
No, a money issuer. I'm assuming that refers to an issuer of money. So I can give a couple of extra examples.
What's the idea mean, Jack, if people didn't get it from the example?
It basically means your name predicts or influences your professional pursuits and the things you choose to do in life, potentially. So the couple examples that were shared with me, if your name is Dennis, you are more likely to become a dentist or marry a Denise. This is demonstrably true, apparently. And then a couple other examples. Meteorologist named Amy Freeze. A lawyer named Sue Yu.
Yeah.
Bro, no. The virality of that is going to be, that is unbelievable.
I'm assuming, Jack, your lineage probably had a few butchers in it. I take it back in the day.
Yeah, my dad wasn't a butcher, but he got qualified in butchery as
just in case.
Just like sort of have to do it. And I like to think that I've taken that route in a very meta direction, you know.
Butcher in the market.
Trying to cut things up precisely.
Well, Jack, you also are no slouch at the barbecue section. Barbecue season and go to Costco.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
That's true.
Yeah, all right.
Butchering
I got
at
one
home
more
on the
example.
grill.
It's definitely. Well, I think we brought this up a while back. Harry Styles was the example that we used.
I remember you talking about that idea.
The pop star is kind of encoded in the name, and if it's not, you have to change the name in order for the market to accept your ascension.
Sue Yu was good.
Celebrity.
I got one for you guys.
Yeah, go on.
Head of Nintendo US is Doug Bowser.
Like that one. That's incredible.
Doug Bowser's good. That's from the anonymous FinTwit account, Buko Capital Bloke.
What about Thomas Crapper, a 19th century plumber and sanitary engineer, often wrongly credited with inventing the flush toilet? That's a good one too.
Well, there
Lord
you
Judge, famous judge, obviously.
Although, blah, hold on. Is the crapper chicken and egg? Do we call it the crapper because of he invented it?
That's a great point.
Or what?
In his
We
honor.
don't know. Or the word of crap already exist. I don't know. Anyways,
I want to
Not
hear
my,
some more
uh,
examples in the
Here's
comments.
a good. I'll give
There
you
we
some
go.
more. I'll give you a couple more.
Go on.
Philander Rodman, father of 29. You've got
Philander Rodman.
you got a lot of crude ones here. These are straight from Reddit. Nick Burns Cox, urologist.
That's great.
That's a good one.
All right.
Tom
Usain
Slick,
Bolt.
oil
Sorry.
executive.
Okay.
Usain Bolt, that's a sick one.
Usain Bolt
That's a
is
great one.
phenomenal.
Yeah,
Fastest
yeah,
man
dude.
of all time.
What else we got here?
I like that
I
one.
mean, there's
That's
a
good.
few
Usain Bolt.
bank names
Usain
as
Bolt's
well.
fantastic.
Goldman Sachs.
Yeah,
obviously.
Goldman. There
Goldman,
you
yeah.
go.
That's a
Yeah,
classic.
That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, there's a
Bilal,
lot here,
why
but,
don't
but look that up. There's some good entertainment in there. And examples in your real life too, maybe your own name. Examine where you are based on the name you were given.
That's a good
at birth.
point. That's true. Are you on the right path or not? All right, let's get on to the tariffs. Definitely none of our last names is tariffs, so don't take anything we're saying with any logic. This is definitely all vibes, no facts sort of podcast today, boys. Where do we want to start with this? Trung, I
Why
know
don't
you
you
sent a
list
few of
off
these.
like different kind of categories that we
Yeah.
want to touch on? Because there's so much, right? Like that's the whole thing is just so insane.
Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we go with the actual, just a quick TLDR on the Liberation Day, how they calculated the tariffs. But I also just let's get the full vibes check. 72 hours in, how are you guys feeling? Right now, let's do a vibe check. Bilal, what is your opinion? Have you been super online about this, or are you just like, you know what?
I mean,
he feels super insane again. Whatever,
I was
let's
saying
just-
to Jack before we started recording that, you know, I tried to stay away from just inhaling news all the time. Obviously, we talk about it on the pod a lot, but this is one of the few times it's like directly hitting everyone's bags, obviously, in the very short term. And not just that, you know, it's like the security of everything. As you guys know, I've just signed up to be a citizen here as well. I'm not fully through the process, but, you know, I'm really committing myself to this way of living. So, yeah, not fully there yet.
Yeah.
So let's see if that goes through. But yeah, just... So for me, it is a little bit of a philosophical thing as well. But yeah, it kind of comes with the territory. It's like there's going to be a little ups and downs with stuff like this. It's very extreme. But yeah, I would like to, I want to get Jack's vibe check before we go into the kind of high level stuff too. How you feeling, Jack? I know you're very zen about most things.
Well, I just had some absolute clanger decisions and gone through some financial disasters myself.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's very entertaining to watch, obviously, like not having obviously personal exposure to it through, you know, what you save in, as everyone has had like a drawdown and whatever you choose to hold your future energy in. But like a lot of the people that have reacted the most strongly to it in my circle have like direct exposure to like a supply chain issue, or, you know, they're like massive uncertainty around their business. And I'm unable to evaluate it, because I would not be able to describe to you the mechanics of international trade in any meaningful way, and B, like I'm not exposed to it personally. Obviously, the things I buy and blah, blah, blah. But I think the most aggressive reactions come from people whose like business becomes untenable overnight, or just completely unpredictable overnight. So obviously the ramifications of this thing are insane. But I think what we'll go into is like, you can either there's basically two sides of this argument that I see sort of netting out. One is like, this is, you know, chaos on purpose, 10D chess. And then the other end of the spectrum is like lunacy, ill thought out, ill prepared, ill announced, blah, blah, blah. So it does feel like it feels like consensus is on the latter part of that agreement for the most part. Like it's a contrarian thing to be on the side of it. but just try and read both sides and watch and see what happens. I have
that's a great point.
No qualification to arrive at which one is the right thing, and it's in motion at this point. So just
I think to Jack, your point, this is the best analogy I've heard on how it was rolled out. It was like, I think a lot of people have agreed there's a couple of things that are trying to be accomplished here. And they're kind of contradictory goals. Like you can't do it all with one move. It's like, get the U.S. debt under control, right? Reshore manufacturing, equalize trade between countries, and kind of reorder the whole system where America can't be the global police anymore, right? There's like all these goals that are kind of getting thrown into the pot. And then the point, I heard this on Ryan Peterson, CEO of Flexport, on the Big Technology podcast. He made this is his analogy, which I think really works here, is like those goals on their own totally makes sense, right? It's like if your goal was to lose weight, that's a noble goal. You lose weight, improve your health, but like there's a way to lose weight.
But don't chop off your leg to lose weight.
Exactly. Get what I mean? So you don't chop off your leg, or you don't starve yourself, right? You go on like a 10-week proper regime to run calorie deficit, or you just take Ozempic, right? But like whatever you're doing, you don't chop off your leg. Or the other things, like if you want to set a deadlift record, you don't go to the gym tomorrow and put on 3 plates on each side, right? Yeah, you work yourself up to it. But that's kind of how I felt about all this. Is like, I think the reflexivity, or when I say reflexivity, the reaction is just knee jerk, like, oh, this is bad. The rule, not good. But like the underlying goals, I think, are quite reasonable. But then again, it's all about execution, right? Ideas are easy. It's all about the execution. And I think that's what we got to start talking about. It's like, we should start from the top on this. But how do you guys feel about that as a framing?
No, that makes sense. Go on, Jack. Go on, after you.
I was going to say, it seems very intentional that it is being done in a aggressive and unpredictable, and that seems, whether or not you agree or disagree with the strategy, I think it's undisputable that is the strategy, right? It's like shock
and awe. They're going shock and awe. Yeah,
shock, or like wildly above what anybody predicted, like introduce massive amounts of uncertainty. And I think how you confirm that, or how you like square that statement with reality, is like watch their, like, how the White House talks about those decisions, right? In a different administration, it might have been like, oh, we're having discussions about how to, stabilize this or moderate the reaction to this thing. That their response has been complete opposite of that. It's like, this is the last thing they should have done. They panic. We're doubling down on the direction. Right?
Speaking about China specifically, right? Because that is a big, the big part of this is the China element. And I'll give you my 50,000 foot level. I think a lot of these bilateral trade things will be resolved. I think 80 to 90% of the countries will just come to some agreement in the next few weeks or months. This is the China question, right? This is what it was when he ran in 2016, when Trump ran. It's like, as we all remember, what was that campaign? He said 3 things. He said 3 words in that campaign: the wall, China; the wall, China; the wall, China. Right? It's like, build a wall on the southern border, China. Is like, that's the thing. And the China question is a very valid question. Is like, China was the economic order that the United States brought in after World War II. This free trade order, it created a lot of wealth. But when you drop China into the mix, this like continent level, billion-plus person kind of country that was that turned into a manufacturing powerhouse and could soak in so much of this debt that America issues, it just changed the equation. Like that the entire global trade equation, it turns out it could not actually work with a country this large and this sophisticated. And any way it would have turned out, there would have been a separation, I think, between America and China. And we talked about this a lot, but that ultimately is a big one. So to Jack's point is, I think that shock and awe is a big part of it. And the messaging around China has been the most consistent, actually, and Jack had said at the top of this podcast, we're just looking at the headlines Tuesday morning, is they're going to move forward with now 104% tariff on Chinese goods, which, just to give you an idea of how massive that is, just take an iPhone. What you do with the tariff is the company that brings a good into the country, they have to pay an equivalent, whatever that percentage is on the good. Let's just say an iPhone costs $1,000, right? A 10% tariff is an extra $100 that Apple would have to pay to the U.S. government. That's revenue, right? And however they split that around, they could increase the price, they could eat it themselves, they could force it on their suppliers eventually. However that happens, Apple has to pay. That's the revenue. That's a revenue
like
raising
it directly impact. They're the ones responsible for paying.
Correct. And so, like, let's say that touches down and now it gets to the retailer. Well, they are the retailer, but let's just say that when it hits the store, you added 2 times to that, right? So whatever, call it the 1,100 becomes 2,200. This is all just dummy numbers. But now, a tariff's 100%. So it lands in America now. It's $1,000. Immediately, they're paying out another $1,000 to the U.S. government. So they're out of pocket. I mean, that's $2,000, right? And now at the retail level, you typically wholesale retail, you want to double the landing cost. So now at the retail level, it's gonna be $4,000, right? So those are dummy numbers.
Not if we're screwing in the US trunk with tiny little screws.
Totally.
That's what we got. Yeah.
That was a big one. That was what Block. He actually pinned that at the end. I want to ask Jack about that because Jack's worked on the manufacturing floors, and I want to get his thoughts on whether or not that is something that could actually happen at a large scale. But let's tease back. We're getting way ahead of ourselves. Let's start knocking off items.
I want to do the knockoff item, but just before we do that, I want to start very high level as well, just to place it, because I think we're gonna get in the details a lot, and I just want to basically frame it around why this is important in the first place, right? And so the you kind of mentioned it there, but taking a step back, a lot of this is people forgetting, like their overall idea. We try not to get super political, but this is what they're telling us they want to do is they want to address the budget deficit, right? And that's different to trade deficit. We can get into that a little bit later. But specifically, the budget deficit is something that they've been talking about. That means making more money as a country, spending less. Doge is what they've got going for spending less. Oh, you mean like a 50,000?
Yeah, like one of the.
But this is where it fits in, right? So that's the overall idea. And that idea, I don't think is a bad idea, obviously, right? Like trying to.
Yeah, they want to rein in the debt because the big concern is if the interest payment on the debt is as much as your defense spending. That's like a huge red flag for any empire.
So
country.
This fits in within that bucket of making more money for the country. And there's different ways of doing that. This is one form of doing this tariff. Other ways of raising taxes for certain groups of people. They're selling the gold cards, which he's talked about, is another way he's trying to raise money for the country. So that, just to place it, that's where we're at. The question of like, is this the right one to choose? Are they doing it correctly? Are they rolling it out correctly? Have they made mistakes? That is obviously what we're going to discuss. The other thing I want to bring up is this idea of predicting the weather. Like, you guys know this idea of like how difficult it is to predict the weather. Like, we look on the phone and it's like, it looks completely fine. You go outside an hour later, it's like raining out of nowhere. The reason is there's so many variables. And like, even with all the technology, satellites, everything we have, it's incredibly difficult to predict when there's multiple variables like that. Now, if you take macroeconomics, that is that times 1,000, because there's so many variables, different interests, different countries. The game theory plays out in completely different ways. So I'll say that even when I've listened to Besson, I've listened to Lutnick, all these different guys, even with the best intentions, and if they were 10 out of 10 geniuses, whatever you believe, even if they tried to execute something, there's a massive risk of it going really badly. And that's kind of where we're kind of at right now, where things might not be executed perfectly. And even if you try to do it in the right way, in air quotes, you can really mess things up.
Oh, yeah, you're breaking so many things right now, right? It's like Jack had mentioned at the top, is like Jack knows people that do supply chains. Actually, now, like, just take a single business, right? Now your input has doubled. Like, literally, for a screw that you import from China, it's doubled.
I was with someone this weekend. They've set up a business. They've got like a massive crowdfunding thing happening. They put their life savings into this stuff. They're going to hit the port, their shipment from China, and they're basically not going to be able to afford it anymore, right? Like, they don't just all of a sudden have 30, 50, 104% extra that's just sitting around. So yeah, those people are directly getting hit today. So, but let's get back to some of the points, because you wrote out a few really interesting things here about kind of intention that you kind of touched on before. I also just added to that. And then specifics on tariffs, how they're calculated, and stuff like that. The impact of the stocks, how there's been obviously a pullback, 10, 15% in different indices. You also want to talk about US dollar and how that compares to, other, the Chinese yuan potentially, or bonds. And then Bessent specifically, what he's been talking about. So any of those you want to start with, Trung? I know
Jack, I think Jack wanted a statement, but with Jack, why don't we let Jack jump in here, and then let's talk about exactly how they rolled this out, and then we can move from there.
I think the thing that I wanted to add or get you to explain as well, Trung, is like the way people react to this is if it's like these are the things that are being proposed as permanent measures, to me is like the total wrong frame, right? They are things that are being thrown at like their military maneuvers, essentially. It's like you're trying to defeat an opponent and reset the game in a different way. Like these things, like even calculating out like, oh, how is my business going to operate with tariffs? It's not, right? It's like they're trying to like beat them into submission and reset the game with different rules. That to me is like maybe missed in a lot of the commentary. It's like that's why it's so high stakes, right? It's like they have to keep the pressure on until they eventually get the result they want, or you risk like taking a massive L in your strategy. But it feels to me, and again, not an expert, there's like some mathematical certainty in the weakness of Chinese currency that can be exploited here, is the theory, right? It's like there is some degree of weakness that will be exposed the longer this goes on, and there will have to be a concession made on one side or the other.
Right. I think that's
Trump and those guys like feel like that's not really in the set of possibilities, that like politically they've moved very far from the like it just feels like sledgehammer versus a more scalpel, right? It's like, this is the approach we're taking. That's what's happening. Like, we'll do it until we get the result we want.
No, I think you nailed the thing to keep in mind. And Bilal had brought it up. It's like, what is the kind of larger goal? Bilal talked about the country's debt situation, right? And I think that leads into what Jack's saying. There is this larger thing at play. And the thing that I'm always keeping in mind is, Trump, obviously he cares about his legacy, right? Of anybody that becomes president is an egoist and a narcissist in some capacity. It's like, what makes you believe you could be the most powerful person in the world, right? 47 presidents now we've had. Obviously, some of them have been president multiple times. So just keep that in the back of your head. The other thing is like, he obviously cares about legacy. And that's what this Greenland, Panama situation is about, securing the entire Western hemisphere. Is he's looking at the history books in his mind. I'm sure he is, right? He's like, he cares about that stuff. So I'm keeping that in mind. But so does Xi Jinping in China. He cares about China's as a global superpower. And you remember, the Chinese Communist Party celebrates its 100th birthday in the year 2049. Xi Jinping is setting the country, in his mind, he's talked about this, on a path to be, if not the superpower in the world, at least, I mean, we're seeing it now, on par with America, if not more, right? And this matters to him. He's talked about this. So you have two people that clearly care about their legacies. Keep those things in mind as this thing is shaking out, right? And we're watching China. Yes, they have economic weakness, demographic weakness, but they're also they manufacture 50% of the world's like key goods. It's insane how much more they've become a manufacturing power than previous manufacturing powers, including America and Germany, right? So I think, to Jack's point specifically, though, I think people within the administration, they are viewing this as a moment where if you just let this play out, if you didn't do this shock and awe, the trajectory of America was to ultimately lose out to China in this great, great nation game. Whether or not it's right for them to be playing this, and whether or not by playing it, you're actually putting the world in danger. There's the other way to think about it. Why can't we just be positive sum? Why can't we just totally cooperate? Yeah. Why does it have to be a competition? And I mean, a lot of it is just basic psychology. It's like literally.
All right, Drunk, I would say, sorry, Drunk, I wouldn't even say competition. It's like it can be competition, but not like in this, in my opinion, like defensive
competition, right?
Yeah.
Is it positive sum? It's like
if you're deregulating,
you create a better battery, we're going to create a better battery. Like you create the BYD, the big EV manufacturer in China, which is overtaking Tesla in the world. You create a battery that can charge in 5 minutes. Tesla's going to create one that charges 4 minutes.
Exactly, yeah.
Everybody wins, right? So
free market, basically, but obviously they're not completely playing free market fairly
but
either.
That's what we're going to knock off. So I think the 50,000 foot level is so important in here. So let's tackle specifically the trade details. So they want to raise revenue to help with the debt situation. So you do that with tariffs. Tariffs ultimately are a tax on consumers. This is how crazy it got. Stanley Druckenmiller on Sunday tweeted for like the 4th time ever.
Yeah, I was going to say,
right?
No
it's
picture.
Like, when Stan Druckenmiller is coming out the woodworks to tweet, and he basically said, I'm okay with a 10% tariff because that is a type of consumption tax. I think we need to reorder society. We're consuming less because the debt situation is getting out of control. That's basically been his thing. That's how he's been thinking for the last 3-4 years, right? So he's like 10%, which here's my prediction. I think the 10% is going to stick. I think all this other stuff that we're going to dig into now is going to get negotiated away, but I think the 10% is going to be the one across the board, which will stick.
You think that trunk across every country, no exceptions?
I think there'll be exceptions, but I think that's going to be the baseline. Is like this is classic Trump, right? Is like we always talk about this. It's like
deal, yeah.
In crazy opening offer, what's the baseline going to be? The baseline now is 10%. I think if most of the world got 10%, it'd be a sigh of relief at this point, right? Which is exactly, if we want to talk about the shock and awe. But so that's the part of it, is like the raised revenue part. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, if they actually cared about raising revenue, like why is there a massive tax cut coming down the pipeline in Congress in the next 3 months, right? So again, contradictions, that's one thing. That's one part of it. The other part is to reorder the entire trading, the global trade apparatus. And this goes to your point, Bilal. This is pure Nassim Taleb, right? Black Swan stuff. What are you breaking? What are you breaking by doing this, right? What is being broken by impacting literally billions of people, billions of businesses? This is a classic, like Buffett. You'll see who's swimming naked when the tide goes out. Everybody is gonna, like, a lot of hedge funds are getting called in now, right? I'll give you the best example. Remember Archegos Capital, the funny we talked about it, but it blew up 30 billion to $0 in over a weekend. It's because there was like a massive market sell-off. So reorder the entire global trade where maybe America can't be the world's policeman anymore, but you have more reciprocal deals. But then let's take it to the actual tariffs calculation, because we're making fun of the tariffs and we're saying, well, what was the joke? Guys, I'm asking you, what were the top jokes that came out when they showed the reciprocal tariff calculation? Let's just list them
the
up.
Penguins? You're talking about the penguin thing?
Right? It's like, you're doing a global thing. You end up hitting an island next to Australia, which doesn't even have any citizens, but it's captured because you got to get every country, right? And then the other thing was, Jack, top of your mind, first thing that was funny from the tariff rollout, the reciprocal tariff calculations.
Just the formula, right? The misuse of the language to describe.
Yeah, trade
and how did they calculate it?
Like how they were calculated, yeah.
Right. It was like the quickest and dirtiest thing ever, which basically people identified was may or may not have been done by ChatGPT. And it's like literally, if you Rohit Krishnan, a friend of the pod, he's like literally just ask Claude, Grok, or ChatGPT the same question. Hey, if you were to rule out like a global reciprocal tariffs, keep it 10% minimum, what would you do? It's like literally you take the bilateral trade deficit that America has with the country. So the deficit is they're buying more from the other country than that country is buying from us. So take Cambodia, whatever it is, call 100 bill. And you divide it by the total amount of trade between the two countries, right? and which is like such a crude formula, and also doesn't
Trump,
take
did
into
that include
account
all? Because that I was going to say, you might have been saying the same thing. Does that include things like technology services that
only
aren't
physical goods?
That's
It's only
which
the
obviously
physical
is
goods, right? It's absurd,
massive,
right? This is what
yeah.
people talking about. Is like America is shipping out. What do we do? We ship
Microsoft
America,
Teams or like
Microsoft
whatever else, Slack, Google
Netflix,
search, all the
Slack,
different things.
Google Drive, right? A
Yeah.
dude in Europe's paying $10 a month for Google Drive. That is
We're
money
not a
coming into America.
manufacturing economy, really. Like we have some industry for that. but
Services,
that's,
right? Services,
exactly.
IP, intelligence. So actually, I think the top line crude number was if you only took the physical goods, like you're saying, Bilal, it's about $1 trillion deficit. If you included the services, the IT, the technology that other countries buy, that actually reduces that quote unquote deficit to $250 billion. So this is where we're picking away at how absurd it is. But it goes back to kind of what Jack had mentioned. It was so shock and awe, right? And if you actually wanted to do shock and awe, you would actually do the way they did it, because it makes the formula, as dumb as it is, if you were paying a McKinsey guy and he came up with that, it would not look great. But if your only objective was to do shock and awe, force negotiations, and I think a larger point is actually to really force a lot of countries to make a decision between U.S. first system and China system, which unfortunately is kind of the situation we've got ourselves into. And so much of it is just basic psychology. It's like Rene Girard, who obviously we talk about mimetic theory. He actually wrote about China and U.S. 20 years ago. He was just observing what was happening. He's like, it's so clear to him that these two systems are going to end up in a mimetic rivalry. And like, how different do you think your lives are from a tech dude in Shanghai? I bet we do 50 to 67% of the same things. We eat global foods, we consume the same types of media, and we're doing the same thing every day, right? It's like at an individual, and the more you are the same with people, actually, that's when it increases competition. But having said all that, I think that's a go ahead.
Just on that point, I want to give one more example. You might have read about this one, like Botswana to US. Just to give like an anecdotal example, Botswana obviously exports a lot of like diamonds to us, like in the US. They obviously don't have anywhere near the same purchasing power as we do. I think we do still export some stuff to them, but not much. And that was like one common example you probably heard or read about. And you can do that for every country: Cambodia, Vietnam, etc. And I'm curious to get your take on that sort of stuff as well, around like basically this idea of like trade deficit even being the relevant indicator here. Do you get what I mean? Because like clearly we are richer, so we're going to buy a lot more from most of the world, and that isn't really what tariffs are. Tariffs are like the percentage that a country is charging at the border. So
let me answer this and let me get Jack's thoughts on it. All right, so here, that's a great question you're saying. It's like, why are you doing this bilateral thing? Is this the right thing to do? And a lot of people that look at the global trade systems, like, it actually doesn't make any sense, right? Because you have countries like Vietnam, they're sending us goods, right? But they're also getting goods from other countries. And this is like Econ 101, is like, what is the competitive advantage of that country, right? If you have cheap labor and you have access to maybe affordable energy, maybe you should just let that country do it. It's like, would America, to your point about Botswana, would America become a diamond powerhouse manufacturer? It makes no sense, right? It's like some countries, because of their geographic endowment or their location in the globe, the trading routes, it just kind of makes sense for them to be doing that type of trade, right? Like Canada, a lot of lumber, a lot of salmon. Should America start onshoring those businesses? Maybe not, right? Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. And that's kind of the point.
That's why the bilateral trade doesn't actually make sense when you have to look at the entirety of the trading system, right?
Yeah.
But where the bilateral trade, and again, this goes back. This actually, if you're going to do it where you fix this entire global trading system, you should have a conference with 150 countries sitting down, right? This would be the McKinsey logical way to do it. The 101 bilateral is clearly America coming in and the Trump administration. Because remember, the thing we haven't talked about is, you just said it, Bilal, is like tariff is just one part, right? They also talk about non-tariff barriers. What is a non-tariff barrier? Okay, I'll give you an example. In Vietnam, if you want to open a business in Vietnam, you have to register and partner with a local. That is a form of a non-tariff barrier because you are restricting trade by requiring something else. It's not a direct financial outlay, but it ends up being a financial outlay and a time outlay, and that is a non-financial, non-tariff
a different form of protectionism, basically. Right?
Exactly. So. Another form of protectionism is the countries we kind of hinted at it. China providing free land and under market loans to their companies so they can out-manufacture. Solar panels is one of the greatest examples in the past 20 years. They just driven solar panel prices to no one else can compete because it's just uncompetitive. If you had free real estate and free electricity, you could also manufacture solar at basically zero cost, right? And dump it on the global economy. And then let me add a couple more non-tariffs, and I'll ask Jack about this. Is like health regulations. So, or pollution regulations, right? They're the non-tariff barriers. In Canada and the United States, you actually have to care a lot about the environment. In say Cambodia or Vietnam or China, they care a lot less. So there's not that cost for them, and then that could be a barrier because you can't compete if you can't handle that type of regulation or non-existence of it. But before we move on to the next piece of what they're trying to accomplish, 40 chess, yada yada yada. Jack, tariff barriers, non-tariff barriers, and then bilateral trade. How do you think about that? What is your reaction to? Is that a right way to approach going one-on-one versus more holistic?
I have a very rudimentary, or like my understanding or my extrapolation from even using the word reciprocal, like the framing of that is to, in my mind, draw attention to the fact that there is essentially you can avoid it by removing tariffs, right? Which is the actual goal. Like anybody that says, okay, we'll go to 0% in either direction, the conversation ends there. Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, they also want the non-tariff barriers. It's like, for example, Vietnam, we no longer want you to require that a American company has to have a local representative. That would be an example. Right. They also want it removed. Which again,
I think that's like reciprocal, like even the word reciprocal being introduced. I think, this is most generous interpretation, obviously, is like shock and awe tactic to be like, hang on a minute. Like there's a premium being charged in one direction and not in the other. Yeah. Right. And the way they calculated the percentages again was like to market that point as opposed to like isolate. Maybe there isn't a single percentage you could point to on every and that's like the interesting thing with exercises like this. It's like those things don't really exist in like hyper complex systems. So they're extrapolating from some hard information and some like opinion and currency manipulate and all the things they bundled in. If you remember, it had like on top of that column, it had like tariff rate, and then there's like a smaller text underneath, including other stuff and currency manipulation, right?
Which clearly they didn't. Which they did not do, right? Yeah. No.
The stated goal is like to get to but the like I guess the intended second and third order effects is there won't be like the reciprocal rate at 0 would be 0.
Yeah.
Which if you're like taking it in the most generous light, it is trying to achieve quote unquote free trade, right? Nobody pays a arbitrarily calculated tax on top of whatever they're importing or exporting in either direction. It's like the simplest way to interpret it. I think how I looked at it was like, oh, that's maybe what they're trying to do. Again, I don't know the ramifications of that or like why. I posted this thing a couple of weeks ago or maybe a week ago when it came out. This is the like post-World War II order where the wealth generated in the US is being redistributed around the world as a way to keep the peace, right? As a way to create these beneficial relationships and like promote trade in a lot of ways, and the removal of that, again, the second and third order effects of that, I don't know if like does it make sense for there's again, like the game theory is probably in favor of the country that consumes the most, right? Would you rather like keep this export income of 100%, or are you gonna cut it all off to not have to pay 103%? You get what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you have the cards to, and you remember China.
You have the cards. They don't have the cards.
yeah. Like the what was it? China tweeted that like they're being bullied.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's like an acknowledgement that like they're on a like that there's that the US has leverage in some ways, you know? I think there's a again unqualified
power dynamic.
Like, say that. Yeah, there's like they're pressing on weakness, and whether or not that's like shrewd negotiating or bullying is in the eye of the beholder, right?
No, I think, Jack, I want to answer one thing, and I kind of pivot this to let's talk about the administration a bit and the people involved, because it touches on something, Bilal's initial question about whether or not bilateral trade is the right way to look at this. But yeah, Jack, I think something you'd hinted at earlier was, why are they doing this right now, right? Part of it is obviously because Trump's in office and he wants a victory. But the other thing, again, is this the best moment if you were playing this as a chessboard tactically to make a move against China, which, you know, because the threat at the end of all this is some type of war, right? Like literally, like the Taiwan thing is hanging over all this. And is this a way where to resolve this situation without having to, you know, frankly, exchange a fire and missiles at each other, right? Is that ultimately what may or may not happen? But I think, Bilal, I think your initial question about the bilateral trade and how we just kind of established, like, look at Botswana. It doesn't make sense for America to re-onshore diamonds, right? But I think this gets to the actual administration team. And another thing that we're seeing now, there's cracks within the team itself, right? Is there's clearly a camp that wants Donald Trump wants tariffs. He's been saying this since the 1980s, right? He's been saying since the 1980s that Japan and Germany have been ripping off America. When Japan was on the rise and people thought that Japan was in kind of the position that China is now, that Japan would overtake America, right? And then Germany would become a manufacturing powerhouse in the 1990s after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Donald Trump wants this. He's believed this for 50 years. Within the administration, there is his trade czar, Peter Navarro, who is super hardcore, protectionist, anti-China. Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff, and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick seems to be much more on the tariff side. Bilal was joking before the call. He was the one that was saying, don't worry, we're bringing back iPhones and we're going to have millions of Americans screwing in the iPhones. This is what they want, right? Then the other side, much more business-minded, is the Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, and obviously Elon. This morning, Tuesday morning, Elon went nuclear on Navarro. So on Monday, Elon already said Navarro's not impressive, never worked in industry. He has a PhD from Harvard, which is a huge red flag, right? That's what Elon said. And then this morning, somebody posted a video on X of Navarro saying Tesla, who is exposed to China, about a quarter of its business is in China, quarter cars manufactured, maybe even a third at this point in Shanghai. But then Navarro said Tesla's factories in America, all they were doing was reassembling parts from around the world, including Asia. Elon went nuclear. You guys pull it right now. I think he called Navarro a moron, and like Navarro's as dumb as a bag of rocks. So like, and then Elon's brother Kimball Musk yesterday said that Trump had become the highest tax president ever, because at the end of the day, tariff is a tax. It's a tax on consumption, right? Will you guys pause? Let me ask this. We should pull back. We didn't ask this. Are you guys pulling back on any purchase decisions based on the presumptive tariffs coming? Because tariffs are a tax on consumption. So I'm curious if you guys have thought about that. And then once you answer that, tell me what you think about the split I just laid out in the administration itself. So Bilal, let's start with you.
Not necessarily anything buying, because I don't have anything in particular I'm about to buy. But yeah, there's a pause in just, it's like when you think you're going into, when there's a risk of a recession, let's say, which we've been for a few times, 2008, basically when I graduated was already, we're kind of in a recession, 2020 with COVID, obviously. So yeah, I'd say it's closer to that feeling of like uncertainty around like maybe don't overextend yourself. If you had a big purchase, like in my case, I don't, but like let's say I did, I'd probably pause a little bit on that. But I'm not going to necessarily change my life day to day, to be honest. But I also live pretty simply. So, but yeah, Jack, what about you?
Yeah, nothing crazy. I think I like read car forums just for fun, and like people spec out these builds of new cars, and they take months and months to build and ship. Right, like you get a car built in Europe, and like you have this tracker, you can watch it come across on the container ship, and then people buying new cars are obviously spending decent amount of money on it, and then it arrives at port, and like the retail price of a car goes
tripled
massively up. And I don't actually know how the like custody of it works, because I'm assuming they pay a deposit, and then when it gets to port they pay the rest to the dealer, and maybe the dealer owns it, so the dealer's getting stuck with that inventory at like a 25% markup or whatever it ends up being. Yeah, I'm not in that situation, but what like there's been a big theme in like the
car
in that world.
I love that. Jack hits like car forums.
Yeah,
and they're just like one of the biggest purchases people make, right? Like they're really significant beyond a house. Like that's probably the most expensive object most people own, and it completely changes the economics of that game. Like the COVID used car market went ballistic. I feel like it's still like the hangover effects from that are still crazy. Like when we were of driving age, my first car cost £200. Literally, like you can't get around to drinks for that now.
Hold on, you bought a used car for 200.
Yeah, wait, how much
car were you driving?
What car was it? Yeah,
Fiat Cinquecento, boys, 1997. Fiat Cinquecento.
Wait, is it a two-seater?
No, it had 5 seats. Barely. 900cc engine.
5 seats, but
mate, if you get five like
it had bike pedals,
5
just in case
lads
the
in
engine
that, you
wasn't
are
working.
struggling to get up a hill. Yeah, it was a tiny little thing. But now, like even
did you have
like,
a spoiler on it, Jack? Tell us. Did you have a subwoofer in the back?
Kept it classic. Oh, your speakers,
couple rims.
But it would be no hubcaps, busted off hubcap, mate. One of the funnest, and man, I missed that car. But like, those are the like again, second, third order effects. Like, I think already like used car, like the floor of the used car market is so much higher than it like ever was when we were in that age bracket. Like you get like a shit box car. I don't think you pay less than 10 grand for like something that's roadworthy. Insane.
Roadworthy is such a great word. Listen, you can buy a car for 200 pounds. It just ain't going to be roadworthy.
No, literally, I mean, in America right now, I think like go on like Auto Trader and say like the cheapest car in the country. I bet it's like one that's running. I bet is not 200 pounds. Anyway, like the knock-on effects, not of the, like there's a lot of knock-on effects in like secondary markets based on this stuff too, which is going to be interesting. And then I don't know, how does it affect the software business? Do people, no tariffs on moving bits around the world, right?
Jack, so I think you hit, let me wrap up my thought about the administration, and let's move into the next two things, the software business you asked, because it actually is interesting what might happen. We can turn into how the world's going to respond.
Yeah, I think it's more second order effect versus
here we go. It's beautiful. Tariff. So let me wrap up the administration thing. The thing listen, my total amateur hat is if Bessent or Elon fully leave the Trump administration, I'd be very concerned. That's like Bessent is top 3 macro mind in the world. He obviously, I think, is singing a bit of Trump's tune because he has to. Obviously, he's in the administration. But there's a news report on Politico yesterday. He flew down from Washington to Florida and was like, hey, listen, we got to improve the messaging here. Like, markets are imploding. And then obviously people have been laughing about some of these Ackman jokes have been unbelievable. Ackman, who learned about wokeism only last September and then went all in on Trump, and then in the last 48 hours has been bashing Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, telling Trump he's got a U-turn. And then I think one of these anon accounts was like, he'll be a he/him liberal by like market open on Wednesday, which is hysterical. But yeah, so that's what I'm watching out for within the administration, who's winning this battle, because Trump wants tariffs. There's going to be some type of tariff. Is the question, though, is it the Peter Navarro level tariff, or is it the Elon Bessent wing tariff, right? So now Jack talked about software. Here's
sorry, Trump, did you see Elon was talking about free trade between US and EU?
Yeah, he wants 0% between Europe and America.
He was even talking about trade, people, like the way EU used to.
Well, you know what?
I say we used to before Brexit for us, but you could just move to Spain and live there, sort of thing.
So, Yash brought up a good point. Is like, I mean, again, when people hear, oh, Trump's playing 4D chess, it's just automatically triggered, right? But a lot of people are, when you look back at what happened with President Zelensky of Ukraine and the blow up they had at the White House, and the question about will they get a peace deal with Russia, a lot of that now is just getting tied up into all this trade stuff. Is like a thing that we've talked about. Listen, Trump, whatever you think about his style, he's the master of creating some type of chip out of thin air, right? And yeah, he does. You might not agree with him creating these chips, but they are chips. And clearly the Ukraine question is a chip on the table now. How much will America support that effort for Europe, right? And now that gets added to what might be this, what Bilal said, the 0% trade deal between the between America and the EU. So, but speaking about EU, this is a good segue. Jack said about software, right? Will software get hit? That's actually what the second order effect is now. Let's say that EU and America can't come to terms, and the EU has signaled that they want to, right? They've signaled at the top levels they want to do something, but they can't. Guess what leverage they have? They get the leverage on the hundreds of billions of dollars of software that gets used in Europe by Europeans. People paying for Netflix, people using Google, people buying ads on Facebook, right? This is all money coming back to US companies. And Bilal used to work in Ireland. They also, that's how they try to get around paying taxes, right? But could the EU just be like, all right, well, you hit us on goods, we're going to hit you with these crazy fines that we've been talking about for FANG for the last 5 years. 10% of global revenues if you don't open your app store, Apple. 10% of global revenues, Google, if you don't allow a second payment system on the Google Play Store, right? So yeah, there are multiple second order consequences. The China one's the biggest one, in my opinion, because China has... Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
I was just saying, not even if, right? They could just say, like, if you want to operate in these countries, that's what you're paying now. No?
Yeah, totally. Right. They can do it right now.
Like, they don't even have to, you don't even have to say you have to do this. It's like, yeah, a tariff on digital transactions is in effective immediately.
100%. And that's you're right. This is the second order effect that, dude, these countries aren't just going to go all lie down, right? It's like they're going to hit back.
Also, Trung, just even on the software stuff, it's more about at the company level too, because we haven't even covered properly, but obviously the stock market got hit significantly. And then as soon as you go into this mode of everyone gets defensive, and we've all been in these companies or worked with them where everything changes, right? Like you start having hiring freezes. You basically cut budgets across the board, which sometimes is a good reset, but you have to let go of more people. We even saw in the last couple of years what happened with big tech, just with the interest rates changing and their stocks getting hit and how many cuts they had to make. And again, you could argue that was maybe needed or whatever. But regardless, like that is the second, maybe third order effect in this case of no longer just about tariffs and the direct impact, but like the contraction of the stock market valuations.
Yeah, the uncertainty is creating like these recession concerns. Yeah. I think Kelch, like Polymarket has up to 60% now. But actually,
of a recession, you're saying?
Yeah, of recession odds. So why don't we do actually recession in stocks towards like maybe one more section? Because I want to ask Jack on this. Jack, manufacturing. This is the other leg that we haven't talked about. Onshoring. Just your total TLDR as the resident former manufacturer. What do you think the odds are?
Blue collar POV.
The blue collar POV. Is there appetite amongst the American population to screw in the screws into an
I love
iPhone.
that you're asking Jack like he's.
No,
he's
it's
still
funny
there.
because Jack's lived in America
Well,
and he's more.
the prevailing narrative is no, right? It's like
Yeah.
nobody wants to do that. But I would. I think the immediate reaction to it is like the timeline on the infrastructure required to like meaningfully replace any percentage of like manufactured objects is very long, right?
Doesn't happen overnight. Doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, it takes like maybe you could argue longer than an administration, right? It takes a very long time. I don't necessarily think there's no appetite, but I do, and I also can't imagine that part of the narrative is really like a serious proposal. Like I think
the onshoring of like bringing.
Yeah, I think parts of it, right, is like why would you? And maybe I'm misreading that, but like the thing, like manufacturing medicine and weapons and things that are in an environment of conflict, things that other people could hold leverage over you with, like significant leverage over you with, is crazy to have ever let that offshore, even if you have to like run a government program to keep it or like subsidize it or like that is why you collect tax revenue, right? To protect your citizens, and whatever political decisions have been made that have allowed that stuff to move around the world. I think in hindsight, majority of people now agree is like that was dumb. And in order to like maybe bring back the 5% of it that is important, like the aggression that's on show is an attempt to do that, right? And especially if like the things that the government is willing to pay for, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems like even though the timelines on that are long, I had this like weird realization the other day where if you're in like a physical manufacturing business, it's not really like software where you have these runways where you can, raise some money and then do 6 months of like experimentation, and then maybe you get product market fit and you like instantly get this distribution around the world. It's like you find out that your cost of goods is going up. You have to make a decision that day, like, oh, well, let's go build a factory in another country. It's an insanely different, complex system. And people will have made decisions based on what happened last week that will take years to play out, I'm sure.
And then by the time they're done, there's a new administration, right? That's what people keep saying. It's like by the time you're done, there's a new president.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's just maybe we haven't ever seen anything like this, or like haven't been interested enough to pay attention to. But I sent that quote in the group chat the other day, like kind of a joke, but it's like you can't redesign that, you can't fix the system. You have to basically destroy it and rebuild it.
Yeah.
The Taleb thing. It's like there's just a certain amount of entropy in the system, and for a lot of people, that's like working out great. I read this other tweet the other day that's like, we've talked about this literally on last week's podcast, like fake economy, like email jobs. I've seen you tweeting about this the last few days as well, Strong. It's like there is this accrued privilege that has occurred with like outsourcing hard work to other parts of the world that has resulted in like insane levels of privilege and luxury and quality of life. Like it's unbelievable the quality of life you can have in the States doing something that is objectively not hard, right? Like what's the Buffett quote? Like being born in America is the ultimate privilege.
Yeah.
Facts. Like you can like exceptions to the rule, blah, 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 whatever. But like the quality of life you can achieve in America is exceptional, and the access you have to objects, great food, health, whatever it might be, is pretty phenomenal. And the like one other central part of the narrative has been the American dream is not about having access to cheap goods. You remember, like that's a
Besant
quote.
Yeah, people are.
And like I think that is like much deeper philosophical discussion, but I think a lot of people would correlate that with quality of life, right? Or would correlate that with the American dream. Like, you can get more space for your money, you can get more stuff for your money, you can like consume more, which as a really basic formula you could correlate with like quality of life. And I think maybe even like philosophically at a country level, you have China with a very different political system that can plan 100 years out. And then we have this like 4-year, like burn the system to the ground every 4 years and like call everybody that disagrees with you a like not a human being, and then try and undo everything that they did. It's like really difficult to I guess it's kind of a miracle that the amount of strength that has accrued to the states in this period of time with a system like that, right? Like,
yeah, that's good
the
point.
volatility has somehow created this like anti-fragility within the system. But this is as a moment in time, like politically one of the most aggressive non-acts of like kinetic war, I would imagine.
100%.
In history, maybe.
I actually wanted to touch on the manufacturing thing. Do you guys read Molson Hart's article? They posted on X, went super viral. I'd point people to this. So Molson_Hart, friendly with him on Twitter, runs Amazon toy business amongst various other businesses. But he wrote 14 reasons. And he's writing this from the perspective of an American patriot. He's like, I'm just going to tell you right now why America is underestimating the difficulty of bringing back manufacturing. So I'm just going to pipe through the 14 reasons, and you guys tell me anything that sticks out, okay? I'll be super quick. Number one, tariffs aren't high enough. We discussed the price, and the point is this. Even if you hit China with 100% tariff, it's still cheaper for them to make it in China than it is, right? But Bilal's nodding. We can get it right now.
You said the iPhone example before. It's like, it would be 4x.
Do you know how much you'd
2x.
have to pay somebody to screw those in America? Like, seriously, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a minimum wage. Yeah.
The other thing we've touched on, China has been building out the supply chain within the country for 30 years, right? So the thing you have to remember about China is, I'll give you an example I know from Vietnam. Vietnam has undercut China on wages by a lot. But the wage for labor is like, at this point, maybe a quarter of the consideration of whether or not you want to manufacture in that country. You want to know what China has that Vietnam doesn't have? It has literally thousands of suppliers for the most random parts in the world right down the street from you, right? It has roads built for manufacturing. Roads for manufacturing are different than roads for your neighborhood, because those roads need to be able to withstand tons and tons of movement across them, right? China has that logistical thing. They're connected to ports. So that's number two. Their internal supply chain is insane. Dude, when I was living in Vietnam, it's like every manufacturer I talked to, I was like, oh my God, like Vietnam is undercutting China now because China is actually pretty expensive to manufacture, relatively speaking. They're like, yeah, it doesn't matter. Like you could charge twice as much for labor in China. We'd still use them because they have everything else, right? The full picture. Then Molson goes through, America as a country has forgot how to make things because you've outsourced it. Like Jack said, is like, yeah, you probably, 95% of stuff, it maybe makes sense to leave, but medical equipment, military equipment, ships, you probably should keep that in-house somehow, right? Labor in America is obviously more expensive. Infrastructure and manufacturers running through these. The time it takes, to Jack's point again, if you were to reshore stuff, how many years would that take? There's no certainty. Who's going to make a capital investment of millions of dollars? Let me pause halfway through if you guys have any thoughts or comments.
Just to your point, Trung, on that's the part I agree with most is, basically what's actually the goal here is actually to have reliance on the things that we really care about, not little trinkets that we can actually, it's better to get from elsewhere that aren't strategic. But like you said, defense, medicine, chips, like those things we are for the future of humanity. Energy obviously is another big one. That doesn't mean everything has to be all here either. It means that we need alternative sources. We can't really be relying just on China specifically.
It can't just be China. Exactly.
Exactly.
But it's just like politics is like this language of absolutes, right? I think that's the part of the issue too. It's like nuance has long gone from a two-party political system by definition, right? It's like good, evil, bad, good. Like it just feels like lost the ability to talk about it in a nuanced way. And I think even in these like the nuance does not do your negotiating position any favors, I would imagine, is how they think about it either, right? It's just, again, like sledgehammer situation.
No, I agree. Is you guys framed it. It's like what Molson's getting at is, you have to be able to talk about this the way he is, but it's impossible, right? You can't, because he's very blunt. He's like, listen, I work with laborers in America and China. He's like, I tell you right now, China for manufacturing, better laborers. They're more willing to eat the 12-hour day in the factory. You could talk, I mean, there are human rights questions the way China does it, absolutely. But in China, in the East Asian culture, that thing, and even just basic stuff, he's talking about literacy and math, he's like, those things for manufacturing. Again, this is his perspective. So I
also
urge
Trung,
people to read it.
To that point, it also doesn't mean everything will move from China to here. It could also be like what's happening with Apple right now. They're outsourcing a lot more to India
to Vietnam,
now.
India.
Exactly. So that could be I know his point is about why we can't necessarily do everything here, but I'm saying like this, if there is like a higher tariff on China than India, that will naturally happen as well, or Vietnam or wherever else ends up striking a deal.
Well, let me actually wrap up with 3 points from him because it'll touch on what you said, Bilal. So the first thing he says is actually, we should only bring back the stuff that matters. And he's like, so this is how you would do it. And to Jack's point, a nuanced way, you would slap 300% tariffs on drones. So you would force that activity back to America, right? He's talking about high-end manufacturing. He said the things that would highest leverage for America to do at home outside of just the defense stuff is like high-end machines and for like semiconductor style stuff, and also agriculture, because America is actually a leader in agriculture. They should be able to do the machine stuff. And then he talked about, and he said something that a lot of people mentioned. It's like a lot of people are like, okay, well, maybe workers in America don't want to work, but what about automation? He's like, what if Apple just automated production in America? Wouldn't that count? And the point he's making is actually China is so far ahead.
Yeah. Exactly.
Even if we all went automation, China would still win that game. They're already automating like crazy. And the reality is this: China is a bad demographic situation. If automation was a panacea, China would have already implemented it because they have to for their country.
That's their incentive.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is, I think there's a misnomer that China, all they do is do like super cheap stuff. That's not the case anymore, right? Like, it's
BYD is the best example, right?
Yeah.
BYD, they're really scaling up semiconductor equipment. They're really scaling up hardware and electronics. But I'll wrap with that on the Molson. I suggest that. How do you guys want to wrap this whole thing up? Are we going to go with stock market or something else?
I guess we've probably got like 5 minutes. So I guess maybe we can wrap up our final thoughts on kind of where we hope it's going to go, I guess, from here.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do you want to go first, Jack or Trung?
Jack, why don't you talk about your thoughts on the stock market, take it anywhere you want, and then final thoughts on how you hope this plays out or how it might actually play out.
I don't know, boys, really. I think my summary is I have no idea. I think the interesting thing is like it's never felt like more meme-ish, like the tweet that got pulled out of like some fake news tweet, 90-day pause was happening yesterday.
From Walter Bloomberg. Funniest.
Oh yeah, and then the stock market pumped for like 8%.
Like
or something.
literally, I don't know, trillions of dollars of volume in a second.
Literally trillions of dollars.
Wild.
And I think like that's, I guess my take on all of this is like it's just so insane how much more dominant narrative is than you kind of give it credit for. And then if you get a like extreme outlier in narrative with like an administration, like it kind of just it really gives you a read on how ridiculous all of this stuff is, or how much it is just like a sentiment machine, and like the idea that people are just like hoping for this glimmer of reversal or certainty, or like, you remember that, like, retrace? And then there was, I didn't send it to you guys, but it was like the market moved on a rumor that the tariff was getting paused, then it retraced, and then it moved again on the fact that it was only a rumor away from retracing, which was like an indication that there's like this underlying belief that wants to send it in a certain direction, right? It feels like all the calls for the total wipeout, Black Monday, devastation, recession are really the market's way of saying, like, they're kind of calling bullshit on the long-term implementation of this stuff. It's like almost a unspoken truth that this won't end up as extreme as it's being positioned right now, right? It's negotiation tactics, essentially. Now we'll give one more shout out. I've been listening to Jack Mallers has a Bitcoin company called Strike. It's been talking about this for months, maybe even years at this point, or like at least like back into the early Trump campaign of like, they told you what they're going to do and now they're doing it. And that's another fascinating thing about markets, right? It's like it holds on until the very last moment and no one pays attention until the headline comes out, but it's been in the public consciousness for such a long time. It just, markets are.
No, I agree with you. Actually, I want to say that we didn't mention earlier. The other thing about this, to Jack's initial point of the shock and awe, this has been extremely, like, they've coordinated this, right? They've telegraphed this to the entire world. They're talking about April 2nd is Liberation Day, right? Trump has literally been tweeting this out for weeks. During the entire campaign, he was talking about he's tariff man. The first 4 years that he was president, everyone knew his stance, right? He's been talking about this since the 1980s. And you're right, no one was ready for the scale of what happened because they thought it'd be much more quote unquote logical. And yeah, I mean, if we're being honest, it was not logical. The messaging hasn't been great.
It's also the second term phenomenon, right? It's like it's like anybody that's been in a job for a certain amount of time, or like, it feels like it's a much more ambitious approach, even than some of the sweeping stuff that was done in the first administration. It's like, oh, can go even more out there with what I'm like trying to accomplish, as opposed to, using the reference point of previous political movements and doing these incremental things. This is like, let's chuck a grenade in there and see what happens.
Man, so wild. But I'll throw my thoughts and then I want you to wrap. What's funny enough, guys, we were joking about during the chat. During the course of this conversation, the 80 minutes at this point, the markets went from plus 4% to it's down like 50 basis points. It looks like this 100% China tariff is really spooking people. And yeah, that's my big takeaway. It's the China question. I think that is the main source of anxiety, the main reason it's going down like this. And something that we didn't talk about, we didn't have chances about the US dollar, right? It was a rule that the exorbitant privilege that we've talked about is America built this system over 80 years where, they run trade deficits. But guess what that also means? It means that all these countries that have trade surpluses, all these US dollars, where do they pile all that money? It goes all back into the United States, the deepest, largest capital markets in the world, right? They're pumping up all of our asset prices. They're allowing the U.S. government to issue debt, hand over fist. And, it's caused a lot of problems. While you hollow out the manufacturing of the Midwestern America, the people on the coast have benefited. Like, quite frankly, everyone on this chat, I'm sure a lot of our listeners too, is the lifestyle that we have and I'll call myself, I've had a fake laptop job. I had a fake laptop job for the first 10 years of my career. I would say the most honest work I've ever done in my life was the 6 months after university when I did construction. Like, digging out a basement was the literal most honest work I've ever done in my life. And that was the economy that I have had nothing. I haven't touched that in almost 20 years now, right? And that's because of the way we've basically, North America has outsourced that all to the developing markets, and all that money that went out there has coming back and supported this lifestyle. And that has led to why America is in the situation it's in. That's why it's not as easy to say like it's a trade deficit, we're going to fix it. But there's benefits, export software, export IP. So yeah, I think it's a fool's errand to predict the market. I think I'll go back to what I said at the top. I think 90% of the countries will resolve with America in the next weeks. But at the end of the day, this is the China question. And that one, I have no idea. I just hope it doesn't get super ugly. And the thing I'd look for with that is if Bessent and Elon, who is winning within the administration versus the Navarro-Lutnick camp. So that's what I'm looking out for.
Yeah, great take. I'll just summarize mine as well. Kind of, I've already mentioned it before. I do think the idea of bringing reliance to self-reliance, to energy, I've got energy, chips, healthcare, medicine, defense, all those kind of strategic things makes a lot of sense. Long term, that doesn't happen overnight though, and you have to do that in a rolled out way. You're not just like overnight everything else is triple the price and we're gonna have factories here. That's obviously not happening. So yeah, that to me is like an incredibly important priority. But to me, the other, if you look at what Americans care about, like I was seeing a graphic this morning, like an infographic on. But the number one thing people care about is the economy still. And if you survey people in the street, I still think that's what they would mostly care about. They care about them having a job, being able to provide for their family, being able to afford eggs, like those really tangible things. And I do think for all the things I would criticize of the current administration, they started off in an okay step for me, like trying to say we're going to be pro-business, pro-innovation, making some changes there. And that to me is more what I would prefer the focus to be on. It's like going on the attack. And this idea of like, oh, we need to just bring everything back, I think is just like not necessarily as important as we might think. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have those jobs, because I still think lots of people would gain from those potential jobs. But we need to like look to the future, and a lot of the manufacturing won't even be done by people anyway. So this idea of like, we're going to spend 4 to 10 years to bring this all back, and then it's going to employ tens of millions of people using screws to make an iPhone at home, I don't think is looking at the future at all. And I think being on the attack means, deregulation to a certain extent, but investing in the things that are going to matter the most, which is basically technology, things we talk about on this pod a lot, AI, making sure we have reliance with the chips and everything like that, and getting out the way. Right now, I think this is getting in the way of that. It's distracting people. It's making people scared. And we need to be investing in those things and not saying, actually, we need to fire a bunch of people because the stock market has contracted so much. Now, long term, obviously, if they're able to pull it off, then hats off, like great job, obviously. But at the moment, it's really, really high risk.
Chess.
Well, yeah, time will tell. Time will tell.
Let me end on one funny note for us is I have to say, I think the AI memes have met the moment. The AI memes of Americans manufacturing is this might single-handedly change the administration's policy. Watching like Americans manufacturing plants, it's like, yeah, we're out. We don't want any of this, man. Oh man, hysterical, dude. But
wild
guys,
stuff.
Great week.
Great to cover it off. Nice one, boys. Let us know what you think of this in the comments. On YouTube is probably best nowadays. Let's hit it up in YouTube. Let us know. Also from the beginning of the show, what Jack talked about. I want to hear some more examples. Usain Bolt and all that stuff. All right, boys. I'm off to watch the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Enjoy the rest of the week, fellas.
Hey, all the best. I might try and catch that. Nice one.
Yeah, get it going.
All right, peace out, boys.
A tough one. All right, have a good one, everyone. Cheers.
Peace.